Welcome to Sustainable Futures with Daniela Bass on the first and the third Saturday every month at 10 a.m. Chess time. Join me for in-depth conversations, exclusive interviews and strategic insights with industry leaders, policymakers and innovators shaping our future. We'll explore how integrating social fairness enhances business and impacts sectors like fashion, food, tech, tourism, sports, and more towards a sustainable social change. Every organization gets stronger by challenging itself, so do we. I know it from my own life experience as a woman with a disability who understands the power of resilience, communication, and of thinking out of the box, and as a female executive leader at global level on social sustainability and inclusion. Be inspired, learn, and gain insights. Tune in, think different, and act with purpose. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, in whichever part of the world you are. And welcome to today's episode, where we dive into global affairs with Ahmed Fathi, an award-winning journalist and UN correspondent and a true leader in shaping global dialogue. Hello there.
Hello, Daniela. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. What's the weather like in New York today?
Today it's getting a little bit cooler in the 60s, but we had the past 4 days were really nice and sunny. But we are getting into the real fall nowadays.
Lots of rain here in Italy. I would like to introduce you to our listeners. You are a gentleman who has an accomplished Egyptian-American journalistic profession, and also being a UN correspondent. You are specialized in global affairs and multilingual reporting. And then, as managing editor of the American Television News, ATN, you really bring over something like 30 years of expertise across tourism, development, and media. And I know that you're also fluent in 5 languages, and your analysis and reports have been featured on major networks like CNN, BBC, and France 24, France 24. So you also, are...
Also Ray Ono, by the way.
Oh, really?
Many years
in Italy?
ago. Yeah.
So I do know that you are also a recipient of prestigious awards, including the President's Lifetime Achievement Award, continuing to shape international dialogue through your expertise in global economics and politics. So it's a real honor to have you as my very special guest today.
It's my great honor to reunite with a good friend for years on this new platform.
Lovely. I have a jolly question for you, meaning it's my jolly, okay? Something unexpected. After 30 years of global reporting, you must have some amazing stories. So what's one of your unforgettable moments, whether it was heartwarming, bizarre, or unexpected, that really, really stuck with you?
Well, it's comes with the job that being in awkward situations and seeing witnessing interesting incidents around the world. I recall a trip in 2019 to Kazakhstan, and we went to Semipalatinsk and the Polygon. And this was a site for nuclear testing during the Soviet Union. And although they have removed about a meter from the soil, and it's been since '89, there was not any testings. The military escort that was accompanying us, we had to dress, of course, in protective gear and everything. But I got scared for a while because the nuclear detector, was incessantly buzzing all the way. And I said, oh my God, what did I bring myself into it? But it was the story was very enticing. And it got me hooked onto it. When I first was invited, I said, definitely, I will go. But this was an interesting incident that happened. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, let's move then to the first part of our interview, our conversation. But with your answer, our audience has already understood what kind of gentleman and the journalist you are. So the United Nations General Assembly is unfolding, and I imagine you're very, very busy. So I'm extremely grateful for your presence here today. So, what key outcomes do you foresee shaping global diplomacy and crisis management in the coming year? And how can these discussions lead to tangible development gains, especially for vulnerable nations?
The first half of your question, the topics that was in focus on this session of the UN General Assembly 79th session were, of course, climate change, where we saw a little hope because now developed and developing countries are uniting together and they are pursuing a path where there is finance and investment in the resilience, building resilience to meet the climate change. This was one path. The second path was the artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And the need, before it's too late, to have some guardrails for this new technology. We don't know how far we can go with it. Being a journalist that follows the track of the disarmament topics, I feel very worried about the future because as we speak, there are already research centers in major countries with major military power are already developing weaponry, and a lot of it are autonomous. So imagine that we come to a stage that we go to a war or managing security, that the decision between life and death is made by a machine. This scenario is, in my opinion, it's a doomsday scenario. That's when we give up our humanity and become enslaved by the machine that we invented. So this is definitely an area that I'm looking at. Take into consideration also that there is the new trends like deep fakes. We have, through this election cycle, we have seen many of these videos. Although the social media companies, most of them, have put restrictions on videos created or generated by the artificial intelligence. We have the third track, which is the organization reform and the Security Council reform. And this is a major issue. It's been going for years.
Yeah.
It was actually one of my first stories when I first came to the UN 13 years ago that I covered the expansion of the Security Council. Here is the catch, that although there is willingness from the powers to be, especially the United States, that they say we demand expansion of the Security Council and suggested for 2 or 3 permanent seats for Africa and 5 seats for India, Brazil, Japan, Germany, and I'm sorry, I think it's the fifth one. But the bottom line of it is that these new members, the new 7, projected 7, will not have veto powers. Fine, for the Germany, Japan, Brazil, India, they can live with it. But what about Africa? Africa, the Secretary General and the US Permanent Representative Linda Thomas Greenfield have said, well, we're not going to decide who's going to be the permanent members from Africa, but we leave this for the African Union. So it's in a way exporting the problem to the African Union. And then if we look into Africa, who will represent the continent on a permanent basis?
Exactly.
Is it Egypt? Is it Nigeria, South Africa, Morocco, Algeria? We don't know. And this will cause a deep friction within the African countries about who that they will pick up. The third part is that even if this reform will successfully pass, we will be back to the square one. Because at the current scenario, with the 15 member, you have 5 permanent with veto power. We can have, and we have seen it over the years, and even to very recent time, that you can't have a 14 country agreeing on a certain resolution, and one country with a veto power can stop it. So what will be the guarantee that when you have 22 or 21 members, that we're not going to have 20 members agreeing and one member with veto power will disagree? That, of course, is a cosmetic reform. It doesn't really address the main cause of the stalemate that we have in the Security Council. I suggested a while back that we should have a new guidance and new rules that, for example, if a country, a permanent member, invaded another country, a member state, and then the whole file will go to the Security Council, and then you find this aggressor is vetoing any movement by the Council. This cannot go, you cannot have it from both ends. So there have to be some new regulation that if a country, permanent member or non-permanent member, is a party to a conflict, that they should recuse themselves, or the least, that if it's a permanent member with veto power, that they cannot use their veto power. They can still vote as a member, but without the veto power.
Yeah, because there is a conflict of interest. And,
Absolutely.
The five permanent would still remain those who so-called won the Second World War. There is the United States, Russia, China, France, and Great Britain. And on the top of that, eventually additional ones who have no power to vote. Or
that's still
under discussion.
That's under discussion, but that is the scenario how it looks now. We won't have permanent members per se with full power, but we will have it with restricted powers.
Right. But then the rotation will remain. That is, every couple of years or so, other countries that are members of the UN can be part of the Security Council.
And there is a direction to create a new seat for small and landlocked countries to be represented, island nations. They are now emerging power, especially with climate change. If you go to the South Pacific, this is serious because several countries will not be on the map. They're going to be covered with water in the next couple of decades or so.
Yeah. And that's why we are, there is concern about people moving inland and therefore preparing the right space, also in terms of urbanization and the right infrastructure to welcome.
There is also another concept, which is relocation of the entire population. For example, the island nation of Palau has made an agreement with the government of Fiji that when their land, where their territory is covered underwater, that they can take their population into Fiji. But that is an ideal scenario, but it's not widely used because with Palau they have small population. Fiji can absorb them, but they cannot absorb all the islands in the region.
So what you're seeing happening there is that in terms of global diplomacy, there are attempts to revisit the structure part of it, of the UN, but also to find solutions that can lead to tangible development gains for vulnerable nations, from what I understand, such as...
That's the ideal scenario. I don't know how diligent they will be in pursuing this objective. Things doesn't move that fast. It takes years, maybe decades, to reach such decisions.
Listen, let's talk about fairness in business, okay? Now, let's change the topic. Everyone's buzzing about sustainability and inclusion these days, but what's a real-life example, in your view, of a company doing it right? Because you have experience also in the private sectors and
I can tell you companies doing it wrong. That they fall as an easy prey for chasing a trend on the social media, and they make big, ambitious announcements how environmentally friendly they are. But then when you analyze their work and their products, you find that they are not environmentally friendly. They are still using material that is damaging for the environment. Their product sustainability is in doubt. We come to inclusion. The ideal situation, of course, that we have organizations that is reflective for the societies that it exists. But corporate world never fails to amaze us. There is now a new concept or a new expression called tokenism.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you find a company board which could be dominated by a racial group or something, and then they come and they will hire one or two members to join the board of minority groups, but with no real trickle down to the different levels of the organization. I think this is kind of a crooked way, but as journalists, we have a duty to expose these corporations. The world have changed. We are not living in the 50s no more. And those who dream to go back to the 50s were not the best times. Maybe they had better cars, but not the best of times. So it's gonna be a struggle between the PR and the cosmetic reforms that they will be suggesting. But some companies are progressing in that regard. I mean, the UN is a microcosm for the world that we live in. I think the United Nations have gone a long way in inclusion among its ranks. I mean, I can remember with this from the previous, actually, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon,
Yep.
that he was championing a campaign called He for She.
Correct.
And then we had the current Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, Antonio Guterres, and he started to bring and push hard for gender parity.
Very true.
So these are goods and these are role models. But is it applicable to every situation?
Mm-hmm.
Then we have to find more realistic solutions that we can apply it into these situations.
Well, I have a third question for you, and this is again a very hot question, very, very spicy. Now,
Bring it on.
yeah, okay, here we go. With global with global democratic institutions under pressure, how much influence will the US elections actually have on other countries' governance? We're getting very close to the elections. Could a domestic shift really cause a worldwide ripple effect? Or are we overstating America's impact, in your view, from what you see there?
In my most objective view, what happens in the United States does not only impact the United States, but impact the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
The world has grown to be interconnected at many levels: financial level, culture, technology, and the technology brought us even closer. It will depend, the outcome of the election will depend. For example, if you are European living in a NATO country,
Mm-hmm.
I think they should be looking to and observing this election very carefully. We don't have really much new faces. Former President Trump and his positions with regard to NATO and the Atlantic Alliance is no secret. He's not a fan of it. And we have Vice President Kamala Harris, who has been in office for 3.5 years and had gained better, in my view, international and diplomatic experience than the former president. We all remember the former president, how he dealt with world leaders, how he dealt with global crisis. We need to have a statesperson in the White House. We cannot, not for the benefit of America, to have a bombastic leader to lead the free world.
So let's observe and let's see what happens. Now, to move to the second part of this conversation, I would like to ask you a question referring to your past, present, and future, okay?
Okay.
I always start by saying, once upon a time, your career started with, help me out here with the pronunciation, with France 24, right? France 24. So, reflecting on those early days, how did your experience in journalism shape your understanding of global affairs? And also, if you can share what specific moment made you realize the power of media in shaping international dialogue?
Well, in my previous career, that was my first up close and personal encounter with global affairs. I worked in the travel and tourism industry for close to 3 decades. I started to work when I was 15, started as a summer job back when I was in Egypt, and then it developed into different parts of the world. And I was lucky enough to live in Europe and then in the United States and expand my activities, not just to Europe, Middle East, and Africa, but also to include the Americas and the South Pacific and Asia. So that was my first, I would say, the seed or the foundation. Before I became a journalist, I have traveled to almost 75 countries or 78 countries. And this interaction with people and being back then, a political risk analyst towards the end of my career before I switched to journalism, made me more close. I mean, political economy and politics and global economy are interlinked.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot separate them, and we cannot take one part without the other. I remember the time when I started in that area back in the 90s, privatization was the buzzword. Everywhere you go, privatization, privatize this, privatize that. And tourism sector was very ripe for privatization. So that was my first forte into the real global affairs and how countries shape their economic policies and decision making in that. Later in my career, when I came to the UN 13 years ago, I discovered my true passion was not in business and economics. I discovered that my true passion was in global affairs. This was the final point where I have seen everything coming together harmoniously in one piece. And that definitely impacted my journalistic style. I did print, I did TV, I did radio, I did online. So throughout, and the development of the media platforms also have been substantially helpful in a way. Yet there is nothing perfect. Sometimes you get really agitated from the over dependency on social media, and it provides also one of the negative things. It provides a platform for disinformation.
Yeah.
And this is the greatest risk for democracy, in my opinion. There was just a report the FBI and Microsoft have uncovered that agents from Russia, China, and Iran have successfully planted fake stories and fake news into the social media. And that is a kind of, if not an interference in the election, I don't know what you can describe it with.
Yeah, this is a phenomenon we have seen happening more and more often lately. I agree. Ahmed, what drives you today as the managing editor of American Television News, particularly when it comes to covering multilingual UN news and global issues? And how do you stay on top of such a fast paced, ever evolving international landscape?
I personally, I was blessed to be able to speak in many tongues. This definitely was a huge plus when I came to the UN. Although English in New York is the acceptable working language and everything,
Yeah.
but it was also a nice practice for my rusty French. And sometimes I discovered that I have a good base and knowledge of Afrikaans, which I didn't really I speak Dutch fluently, but I did not really think of the linkage. But later it became nice and even expanded my contacts and my view of South Africa and Namibia, which they speak Afrikaans. This is the multilingual part. As far as ATN we came in 2015 as a unique attempt, entrepreneurial at the same time, to produce news for TV stations from around the world who don't have permanent presence in the UN or in New York, in the 6 official languages of the UN, which is Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. Occasionally we do other languages, being in New York, there's no shortage of talent. We have talent from every corner in the world. And if you don't know somebody, but somebody knows somebody, so you have always a fresh take. Providing the news production in these languages, we have to be really sensitive to the national concerns of these media organizations. If I'm reporting, not me, but if ATN is preparing a report for Chinese media organizations, as an example, we cannot keep hammering the idea of democracy and human rights. We just need to give who, where, what, and when, without any analysis.
Exactly.
If we are doing feature stories, that gives us more platform. And if it was going, for example, to somewhere in Europe, then we have more freeway into really putting things into perspective. So it depends on the markets. And when working, I prefer to use native speakers. They have the sensitivity is higher for them.
If someone wants to benefit of your services and the services of the television we just spoke about, or you as a journalist and so on, how can they get in touch with you?
They can just go to our website, amerinews.tv, and drop us a line or give us a call, and we'll be more than happy to provide the service. You don't need to be only at the TV stations, but also we provide for organizations, for documentaries. Corporate also is becoming more active, and we want to get involved, especially with the SDGs. We have the 17th goal, which is partnerships. And this is becoming, after the pandemic, there is a surge in corporations, small to medium size. The big corporations, we all know their arrangements and their guidelines, but small to medium size is now more interested into creating these partnerships with the UN.
Can I ask you to spell it slowly?
AMERI News.
Okay, so that's the website where they can find information and get in touch with you. All right?
Yes.
Thank
you. Just fill a form, send us an email, and we'll take care of you.
Fantastic. Now, from the present, we move to the future. So, envision yourself in the year 2071. Imagine you're 20 years old in that world. Since, the Summit of the Future just took place at the United Nations, thinking of the next generations to come. So imagine you're a next generation to come. And what kind of society would you hope to live in? And then I have another question.
The utopia, the idea of the utopia did not differ from Pluto till today. We want to live in peace, in prosperity, and we want to live in a society that it is a society and not a tribal territory that people are struggling and fighting. I am a man of peace. Through my previous career, I found that tourism is an extremely important tool for creating a culture of peace, bringing people together from different countries, whether people moving to visit the country or people in the country interacting with people from another country. This can bring a new dynamics. That's the world I dream of. On a personal note, I will dream that I will be lucky enough to have a beachfront house that I can live and sit in my Porsche and being able to reflect on my previous life.
Okay, that sounds
That's a combo, my retirement
yes.
plan plus the future plan.
I like it. And I agree with you. I think that you mentioned earlier on digital technologies and technologies in general, and robotics and artificial intelligence that should be at the service of human beings and not let it control us. So, in a way, I think we should go back. Maybe I'm romantic here, to the heart, to start again using our heart, and respect everyone, because everyone deserves to has a dignity to be respected in any case. My last question related to the future is, how do you see global diplomacy, technological advancements, and sustainable development shaping the future? And what role do you believe the media will play in this?
I don't want to sound negative, but I see the role of the media is diminishing in a way. With the proliferation of the social media platforms and the instant connection. I mean, there is a generation we don't know really what makes them tick. This is the Gen Zs,
Yeah.
which I'm a little bit double their age or something, that I cannot, sometimes I kind of sit back and say, what makes this group of people tick? We need to have more research in that. But I see that technology is going to have a significant role in shaping the future of the media. However, being that said, there's going to be a huge responsibility on the remaining media organizations to fact check, correct misconceptions, fight disinformation, expose illicit activities that's been happening and around it. So I'm not 100% optimistic, but I am more realistic in my approach.
Yeah, that's the old-fashioned way of doing journalism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, put your face there and say the truth, based on facts, of course.
Well, you don't make many friends with that approach, by the way.
No, I know. Listen, I know you have to go, but what's next on your agenda once we say goodbye for today?
My next is continuing following the election. I had the habit of taking 10 days off after the ANGA meetings. This year, because of the elections, that's not possible. And even after November 5th, because I'm expecting that we are going to have a delayed process in counting all the votes. So I'm hoping that towards the end of November or so, I'll be able to take some time off. But I have I have an invitation as a keynote speaker for a conference in Southeast Asia. And then in early December, I have another invitation to go and give a keynote speech in the North Africa, in the Western Sahara.
My gosh, that's lots of traveling and lots of fatigue. I mean, with pleasure, because it means that, you're really bringing something to all these conferences, because you have this global view of things. I know how it works in the UN, being exposed to 193 or so countries.
Yes.
It's a lot of expertise and knowledge and passion you will bring there. It's a pity. I'll be in Montreal for a conference, invited as a speaker early December, but that's another story. Otherwise, I would have passed by New York another time.
That we can synchronize at some point.
Yes, indeed. All right. I thank you very much and wish you an amazing day. Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.
As I wrap up this episode, my heartfelt gratitude to today's guest and to all of you. Join me for the next episode as we delve deeper with special guests, uncovering thought-provoking insights and actionable steps, paving the way for a brighter, inclusive, sustainable tomorrow. Thanks also to Damian Morton, music, and Maria Cortez Gagliano, social media. Don't miss out next episode on shaping the future we aspire to. Ciao, ciao!